Well, hello, Zach.
Hello, Jeff.
Looks like you got some dramatic lighting going on there with your room and your camera.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad that you think so. Yeah, it's a work in progress always, but yeah, I'm constantly improving my lighting, my rigs, my I've got a little teleprompter now, so trying to get at least a little
A
bit fancy with it.
teleprompter, my goodness.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have this art conversation's already been written out?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I'm reading off a script and we're just really listen, that would actually be way more impressive than if this was all ad hoc. Yeah.
Well, we're doing a thing or two,
I think so. Yeah, at least two, maybe more. Uh,
maybe more. I was thinking, Zach, because I came thinking we had a meeting, I don't know when it was last month. I had a bunch of projects to the side were kind of things I'd like to get to, and you're like, well, I think we can do all 11. With all,
yeah,
I'm,
yeah.
I'm just thinking is like, I've got a full-time job. You got a full-time job.
hmm
And I think a lot of the work that you do behind the scenes with not only with the backer kit, while you're doing the writing for some of these things, but also the backer kit work and Kickstarter work, that's quite a bit.
It's a lot, but I think one of the things that makes it work is that you and I and the other people that I work with, by and large, have a really good working relationship in the sense that you can go do your thing and I can go off and do my thing, and then we tag up and just frequent enough that we know what each other's doing, but we're not stumbling over each other to get things done, which is always nice.
That is true. That is true. And I think we got enough stuff on the docket that we can jump back and forth between things as necessary too.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Having things to pivot to is always useful because I mean, if we'd have had this conversation 2 months ago, when we were having this conversation 2 months ago, we had a different order for how projects might evolve or come out in the year, but then things get shuffled as some things slow down and other things speed up or whatever
Or
you.
somebody says, I got an idea.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody gets a weird wild hair. So.
Yes. Yeah. I thought, well, if Zach feels that strongly and feels that inspired, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's working out, or at least it looks like it's going to work out. So,
Yeah, the
yeah,
proof's in the pudding. But so first thing we have coming up this year is Dark Visions,
yeah,
which is a ShadowDark supplement.
yep, yep. Diving into those waters for the first time. So,
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think initially I kind of threw the thing out there about doing some sort of a devilry or demon bestiary for OSE. I think that kind of general concept came to your mind, but somehow, well, not somehow, but it kind of morphed into a very clear directional Shadow Dark project.
yeah, I think you had picked up somehow somewhere that I really liked writing about cults and really had an itch to do like a bigger cult centric or a cult occult project in general. And I think you pitched like a demonology book or something of that nature, which is also awesome. Like I'm super excited about that as an idea. And then you had pitched OSE. I know at one point we talked about DCC for a while. And just trying to like think about, I guess on my end, I was thinking about like what is there a book like this already out there in that community, and is the community hungry for it? And I'm not saying that it would that those communities wouldn't have been excited for this sort of a book, but when I started playing ShadowDark and thinking about ShadowDark a lot, I was like, this is the right home for this, and this community is hungry for this sort of a thing, I think. It just felt like it all kind of clicked together. So,
Well, and I think, everything's speculation, especially at this point, right? Because Shadow Dark has been around a lot less time than Old School Essentials. I think we kind of can plot along and kind of get a general feel about what an OSE product will do,
yeah.
you know. But here we have a community that is fairly new, and it seems to be fairly passionate. The question is, how much do they want, third party content?
Yeah. And I think that the Shadow Dark atmosphere has been one of like very enthusiastic, very gung ho about the content that's been released for it so far. We haven't seen a lot of like Shadow Dark projects come through Kickstarter crowdfunding yet. Few and a few really good ones, but not a lot. Um, but what has been very clear is that there isn't a lot of first edition stuff for it yet. And part of that I think is, I mean, I don't know but what is said publicly or whatever. But I think part of it is when you sell out of your first couple print runs so fast of the initial stuff, and you're having to play catch up with reorders and reprints and all that. Like it's hard to think ahead or get too far ahead with new content. And I think that in that space, there is, if you can't get enough first edition content to fill your games or to fill your shelves, I think that's a great opportunity for third party in the same way that like D&D there for a while in the early days of 5e had that like cadence of no more than four products a year, one a quarter. When you're that regimented and they were putting out good stuff for the most part, but only once a quarter, there's a lot of space in there for other people to come in and fill the gaps.
Oh yeah, and I think, and for Kelsey and Company, I'm sure, I mean, they're not a large studio, a large publishing house. It's just, and anytime you're starting involved with publishing, there's a whole lot of activities that take up your time and your energy that you normally don't think about when you're not in the throes of it. So I can imagine for them, it's, having plans for the future. I think they put out a number of zines and I think a number of products, but I'm sure it's going to take her a little bit to get ramped up for anything. Indeed, if there's anything major, I don't know what she plans for the future.
Yeah, we got the official expansions of Cursed Scrolls coming in about a month, but other than that, not sure. Yeah.
Because really, with old school essentials, other than a few modules, I think Dolmen was really the first thing that Necrotic Gnome has really done in a major way, other than, like I say, there's few adventures.
Yeah, 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 yeah. We don't have these big expansion content for OSE. We've got a lot of like smaller, great small adventure books and things like that, but we don't and I think we just got like the Necromancer class and a few things, but like we don't see a lot of big expansion books on these, OSR type products usually. So
Well, and I've not played ShadowDark yet, or have ran ShadowDark. So I mean, what's the selling point for the system?
I think it's a bridge. I think it's a bridge. And I think I say that in the best possible way. Like I love bridge products, but I think it is the connective tissue between the enormous amount of 5e players and 5e community and the OSR community. It very much, I think, feels like if you sit down and play it, and the system itself feels very 5e, stripped down, and then add in some cool homebrew or house rule ideas. Um, but if you flip through it and you're not reading it, but you're just kind of perusing and getting a feel, like it definitely has more of an OSR presentation style. So it's kind of this blend where if you're a hardcore OSR gritty enthusiast, you're probably going to say, "Oh, this is still too robust for me." And if you're a diehard 5e purist, you're going to say, "Oh, this goes off in a weird direction." But the truth is, I don't think there's very many of those either type of person, or at least that's not where there's a huge amount of people who are very happy to have some crossover. And a bridge like this is a fantastic way to get people who have maybe played fifth edition for the last decade, but have yet to branch out to trying other things and being exposed to new ideas. I think that Shadow Dark is that. And I, as someone who loves fifth edition and who has a long history with fifth edition, like I had found that I didn't want to play a lot of 5e anymore. And this book, and the ideas that Kelsey has around improving the experience, I think are in fact a significant improvement and is exactly the type of game that I often want to play.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've not delved a lot. I've scanned a little bit through the rule book, and I'm looking at the best area and such. I'm wondering, and I forget what's Kelsey's company called?
Arcane Library.
Arcane Library. So I think Arcane Library, I was thinking like, why is this a bridge? But I think Arcane Library has a very strong track record for writing fifth edition adventures, correct?
Yep. Yep, 100%. That's the nucleus of what the company what once was and to some extent still is.
So really, it's their reputation that helped them to do this. I think, I don't know that if anybody else had put this out, that it may have gotten the traction that it did.
Yeah, I think that certainly it's a short list, right? I think that it took a 5e creator who's established in the community to make a book like this.
Yeah.
Um, but as some, like one of the things that I've been doing before writing this book was I've been running a lot of ShadowDark, and you can see in the ShadowDark Facebook group, like I've been running a big Moria campaign there, and just to communicate how easy it is to run or adapt. Like that Moria book is a fifth edition book. That campaign that Free League put out was called like the Gates or the Doors of Khazad-dûm or something like that. Um, and I love it. It's super easy. Like I do almost zero prep work to run that campaign in Shadowdark. It's really just about, Shadowdark is fewer modifiers, you know, lower numbers in general, a little bit more deadly, a little bit longer to level up. Hit dice are a little bit smaller and they don't progress as much. Just like toning down the math a little bit and toning down the power creep a little bit. So on the GM side of thing, all I'm really doing is like dropping some hit dice from monsters or their hit points a little bit, or I'm, removing a damage die from their attack or removing the proficiency bonus from their to hit. Those sorts of things are very easy tweaks to do on the fly. And it's pretty much a one-to-one at that point. Which I love because I got a lot of 5e stuff sitting on the shelf that I still want to run.
Well, I imagine I maybe I shouldn't assume, but I would imagine with Moria that the things that they're encountering, at least initially, is going to be pretty low level stuff. So I would imagine that it's easier to start out with the smaller things, the orcs, the goblins, whatever, and then maybe an occasional cave troll, but then work your way up. It probably you start getting a feel for it probably pretty quickly by through the extension of use.
And that's the thing, right? Exactly. And that's the thing is that like the thing that I love most when I play D&D is like the dungeon crawl. It's that like it's the idea that we're playing monster hunters. We've got classes that are built around fighting things. So let's go into the darkness and find things to fight and find treasure to haul out of there. That's been my favorite part of D&D for forever. And so Shadowdark is a great answer to that, where 5e isn't. 5e wants you to play heroes, and there's very little resource management, um, and it's really designed around highly balanced and in the case of many published adventures, very winnable scenarios or easily winnable scenarios. And that's not what you want in a dungeon crawl. You want a lot of tactics, you want a lot of iffy situations, and um, you want there to be stakes all the time because stakes is where you produce drama if you're fighting things over and over and over again.
Well,
And
and I think
so,
also,
yeah,
especially like old school essentials and some of these others with the low hit points, is that fighting is not always the best avenue. In fact, that maybe that's a state you don't want to achieve. So you try to think of ways of either to avoid battles or to make sure if there is a battle, it somehow is weighted in your favor.
that's the key right there. I would say that whether it's old school essentials or Shadow Dark or Fifth Edition or DCC, I think all of these are fighting games very clearly because we don't see classes that are produced that are like, here's the politician. None of their abilities have anything to do with fighting. Like that would be
Right.
cool. But we don't have that. Um, I think the rules are very clear that you're supposed to fight monsters. And I think whereas you don't need to carefully design and construct every encounter to where you see the path forward to victory for the players at every state. I do think that these are all games where if you're tactically minded, which you should be. That should be part of it. If you engage in strategy, that there is a through line for success if you set yourself up for it. And like that engages all the right parts of the brain for me.
But I
I'm
think like
super.
if you think about like you can put like a dragon in there, even people are low level characters, it doesn't mean they have to fight it.
Yeah, yeah,
It,
yeah,
but I think also too, it's like, if it kind of goes back to tactics, if you have some thieves and they got backstab, I think that it feels to me that most of the time that I've ran fifth edition games for people, it's kick down the door, run into the room and fight the things.
yeah, yeah.
Where as opposed to, hey, how about we set two people on the other side of the door, we have somebody make a noise, or
Yes,
something along those lines.
yes,
Those are the
yes.
types of things that I think makes it or can make it more interesting. I guess it just depends what people want out of their play, but you're less able to if you don't have Thunder Wave or whatever that is, you know.
Yeah. The puzzle side, solving side of our brain is and the part that keeps us engaged in between our turns as a player are much more engaged in the method that you're describing as opposed to kick down the door. If it's kick down the door, then once I've done my turn, there's no tactics, nothing that I need to worry about. It's very easy for me to check out for the next 10 minutes till my second turn rolls around. But if everybody has to work in tandem and we're all trying to figure out how to achieve the puzzle of this encounter, we're likely to be more engaged consistently. That's huge. Um, yeah, and I'll say that like on my end, I do think about like running characters running away from encounters, but I also think about like how often do you want that to be the answer? And I think the answer to that is like maybe 1 in 10, right? Like,
I think it depends what you're doing.
hmm,
So I think in the if you're monster hunting and your idea is to monster hunt and get treasure, probably not.
yeah,
It's like, I guess you want to be Odysseus or do you want to be, Achilles? I mean, do you want to be the person that's, cleverly makes your way through places you probably shouldn't be going, but somehow make it? Or do you want to be the person that's, a heroic person that is able to, meet things in combat over and over? So I think it kind of varies, but
yeah,
what you're wanting your experience to be.
yeah, yeah, that's fair.
Because there's times where it just feel good that you got the armor, you got the sword, and you're able just to just cleave through stuff left and right. There is a certain amount of joy in that.
Yeah, yeah. I fully agree. I think it's hard to progress the story if you're running away a lot. If there is a story to progress, because that's not always the case, right? Like some of the best dungeon crawls don't really have a story connective tissue. They just are fun to go do.
Yeah, well, I think the neatest things in the Mines of Fandelver was the whatever that castle was, where it had a lich in this castle, and the lich was neutral.
Hmm. Hmm.
Did you didn't have to do anything to it. It was just simply a lich to just leave it alone. And then the party that I was running through, kicked open the door and got messed up by the lich and was upset. And it's like, why is our lich in this dungeon? Like,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
because you're working on meta knowledge saying I'm the X level character and no matter
yes.
what, everything should be there. But I think if the idea in the player's minds is that there are things out there that are beyond your level,
Hmm.
and you just need to be careful. It becomes less of just kicking down the door and letting the clerics heal you as you're having chunks of flesh cut away from you.
100%. I'll just say it this way, in one of the adventures that has in Dark Visions, there is that creature that you should not be contending with at all ever. It's in there, but that does not mean you should fight it, or things are going to go real poorly for you real quick. Because yeah, I do think it's expressing that there's a world uh, outside the balanced, quote unquote, or even just somewhat balanced, guardrails that a setting or an adventure might have is important.
Is that in the Tower of Six?
It's in the Tower of Six,
So I
yeah.
found a great picture, and I found a picture of that type of creature smoking a cigar.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? That's kind of cool because it
Yeah.
could be you just see that you're like you can parlay with this thing,
Yes.
or you can just make it mad.
Yes. Yes, exactly right. Like the cigar is the universal sign for this is probably somebody that you should not F with, but they're not completely unreasonable.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
I'll send you the PDF
yeah. I
once I get a
love
little more
that.
finished.
Yeah,
No, in fact, when I saw that, I was really kind of, I really love that. Took me back to the Lich idea too, where it's just like, you know what, just you don't have to make enemies of everything. It's like,
yes. Well, and I think in another one of the adventures, the second one, without getting into really much spoilers, there's a lot of, if you look at how many creatures are in that adventure, how many potential enemies, like that's a super deadly adventure. If you just go in and say, we're going to kill everything that's in this space. So there's an incentive there to, either ally with different folks or at least allow them pit one group against each other and let them kind of whittle each other down. Like do something to help your odds because like, yeah, one of the answers can be put a big creature in there that reminds people. The other one is just like, I am a big proponent of when I run stuff, I think about if this was a movie, how many people would be in this tower? How many evil cultists would be in this this organization? How many demons would be in this pit, right? Like
yeah,
what makes sense? And if the answer is six demons, well then there should be six demons, right? Like because having one demon, even if that's the quote unquote balanced answer, mechanically isn't gonna feel satisfying for the narrative, the story that you and the players are telling. Um, so that's I think that's the thing that I find myself trending towards more than anything else is just saying like, boy, there's a lot of enemies here, but that's kind of what this adventure needs in order to in order to feel real and valid.
yeah. Well, we've got a total of two adventures in the book, and then a third full-fledged adventure that's supplement to that as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So was the thinking with the three adventures?
I don't remember how we started down that road. Like I think initially it was like, hey, let's do an adventure in the back of the book. Um, and if I recall correctly, I was thinking about what that adventure would be, and um, I can't remember the exact framework of it, but I think I just hit upon like I had an idea for what I wanted the first adventure to be. That's really short, just a one shot. It's like going down into like the not quite a five room dungeon, but it's basically a five-room dungeon. And there's a little mystery, a little bit of puzzle solving, and some fighting and some cool loot. Like, but the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, there's some really fun um, other adventures to be had that this could like potentially lead into. And also, I think that this adventure is going to be short enough. At least one more adventure could fit into the book. Um, and that kind of then evolved into, well, can we do a trilogy that is scaling sizes and levels of scaling sizes of map, scaling sizes of the number of sessions it's going to take, scaling difficulty, but also to where they're each independent of each other if you want to, but they also can be interconnected to form, a level 1 to 4 or 5 campaign. And I think that's kind of what we ended up with, which I'm really happy about. You could play through these three and, you know, have a real story that you've played through that has a beginning, middle, and end and gives you kind of that pathway, not just to have a story to tell, but to use a chunk of the things that is in the resource side of Dark Visions.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's fun because we have some new classes,
Hmm.
we have some spells,
Hmm.
we have some artifacts, and then these things get all sprinkled into the adventures.
Yep. Yep.
And when I say characters, as far as certain characters, certain abilities, they interact with certain situations differently and specifically.
Yep.
So you could play this without, I mean, theoretically, you could play all three adventures without, well, you can't really play the first two without Dark Visions because they're physically inside Dark Visions.
Yeah.
But the third one you could probably technically play without Dark Visions. It'd play fine. But
Oh, 100%. Yeah, there's no re I don't see a reason why you would. I mean, I think that Tower of Six is definitely a standalone. It references Dark Visions, but in nothing that's like heavily meaningful. Like you're gonna be at a loss here. It's just that you might have to make up a spell that isn't in the book or whatever, but that's not a big deal. Um, but I think that it is important to me to say like anytime I buy an RPG now, I want to say like, or even a supplement, I want to say like, how do you imagine this being used? And at this point, it's just I'm loath to write a bunch of stuff or buy a book that doesn't have like a here's an adventure that shows you how this could be put to use, or even not just how to, but here's a drop-in thing that you can just have that makes it easy for you to utilize this stuff.
Yeah, and I think you've done a good job, and I think all the rooms and everything is done in a very, I don't say succinct isn't the right word, but it's definitely there's not a lot of fat that's written into these. It's definitely very much at the table, easy to run without having to parse through paragraphs to be able to understand what's going on in a particular room.
Yeah, yeah, that's the goal. I don't like to read a paragraph. So and Kelsey did a great job with the adventures that are in her scrolls of kind of giving a template for how she envisions adventures being presented. And so just grabbing that and saying maybe we put our own twist on it in a few spots, but by and large it's saying, great, let's use what's been established and dive off there.
Yeah, because even looking at like with Old School Essentials, I've noticed from in their within their products, their format for adventure writing changes.
Yeah,
And so they don't necessarily stick to it. And I don't think it's there's anything wrong with changing the format, and one doesn't have to be beholden to the strict format, but one should be, I think, try and maintain the spirit of what's there.
yeah, yeah. We did a few things like, we have the full map at the beginning of the adventure, and then in every page, every when we go to different rooms, we're doing that zoomed in portion of the map that's right there on the page for you to reference. So you're not having to flip back and forth. I mean, that's not a new idea. That's plenty of people have done it, but I like that. You like that. And we're like, yeah, that's not what the ShadowDark build is, but it could be, and it works just great.
Well,
For,
it's functional in that when you open up a spread, you don't all your information's right there. You don't have to flip back and forth to a map.
yeah. And then the other thing that I found was that in the Diablerie Curse Scroll, you have that great adventure, and that adventure is presented in this way where like all the information that is player facing is in like a paragraph with like bold keywords or whatever up front, and then you have like bullets for the GM underneath, which is great. And that's how a chunk of our adventures are written. But then when I got into Tower of Six, we're doing a 28 room dungeon for to strip it down to its general form. I found that that same parameter over and over and over again didn't feel it felt repetitive in the way that I didn't want it to feel, because at the end of the day I'm describing roughly the same visuals, if I'm just using that framework. And so what I ended up feeling like was, hey, in this adventure, instead of doing that, we can have a little bit still of that, but let's have like a sentence of a room descriptor that's flavorful that the GM could even read aloud up front, and where we kind of cast off the formatting and just say, here's a great descriptor that makes this room feel a little bit unique. Um,
Well, I think you've hit a nice balance because I think more modern, like I've noticed that when with more modern adventures, that the tendency is to tell somebody everything about the room,
yeah,
everything you need to know, everything's right there. Old School Essentials tells you kind of what's in the room, but without much description, with the expectations that players go in and then they mess with stuff to figure out. Okay, there's an altar. Then the players are supposed to ask questions. Where I think, in a sense, that they're both good approaches, but I think in some ways, with Old School Essentials, we have a repeat of, uh, you know, black tiles on the ceiling and walls over and over again. It gets a little bit old.
and or just like one thing is like describing the dimensions of the room. That is something that very clearly players need, but also very clearly, I think in this day and age, especially where we're in the age of the VTT, it's pretty much assumed, I think, that if you are doing a dungeon crawl, especially a dungeon crawl, You have access to a map, and your players can see that map visually as well. That is within your grasp. And if you are looking at a map representation, I don't need to tell you that the room is 20 by 40. You can see that. And that's just so many words that you can throw out right there. Even though, yeah, the player needs to know because that matters for their spells or that matters for their movement or that matter, all those things. Super important info. We don't need to be writing it into our adventures anymore, I don't think.
No, I don't. I agree, but and I think that the idea is, as a GM, I enjoy having prompts to read.
Mhm.
I mean, I really don't. For me, my strength is not being able to describe. Well, I also found out. I think there's a term called. I think it's called aphasia.
Uh-huh.
I don't have the ability to mentally picture things in my mind.
Visualize, yeah.
And so it's hard for me to, if I see a room to try and describe it, it's very difficult. But for me to have like with just a sentence or two, that's perfect.
Yeah. Shall we talk about a little bit about the other piece of Dark Visions, which is the biggest portion of the book?
Yes.
Um, I don't know where to start on that. Um, Let me think about this. Well, I guess it comes down to so there's the biggest section of the book is the section called cult domains or cults, however you want to look at it. But it's the idea of like there's 16 domains in the book, and each domain is a two-page spread. Each domain is tied to a one-word key descriptor, like darkness or ashen or nightmares or something like that. Um, and then you have basically a write-up for what that theme means for a cult. You have different like tables of hooks or rumors related to the cult. You have a table of like a plot generator for the cult. Then you have magic items and stat blocks for unique creatures that the cult might have in their ranks. Um, I've already seen some people asking about this on different Facebook groups and whatnot where we've been chatting, and I think this came out of I've sat down and I was thinking about the gods of ShadowDark. And I think there's 9 gods presented in the core book. Initially, it's like, okay, well, you do a cult for each god, and then maybe like a demonic cult and a what, like you could do it that way. But then I was thinking about the fact I'm like, I have my own. I run it in Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth, and other people are going to run Shadow Dark in their own homebrew settings or in Greyhawk or in whatever, right? Like we're all going to do our own. And as soon as I start naming all these cults after, you know, Saint
Right.
Dragnus or whatever, the value to you running it in your home setting or whatever goes down. In addition to that, I didn't want there to be just 9. I wanted there to be more. And so it's like, well, Saint Tragnus is righteousness and justice as 2 key tenets. Just as a quick example, there should be multiple cults aligned with that, just as there's multiple cults of many religions, right? Like that are based around one religion or one deity or whatever. Um, And so became this idea that like, hey, there could be an Ashen cult to several different deities, but they probably approach the idea of what does it mean to be an Ashen cult different ways. What does it mean? Why would you emulate? Are you seeking to emulate the idea of like snuffing out the light across existence? That's one way of approaching an ashen cult. Is it about memory or loss of memory or what came before? And ashes are kind of a semblance of that. That's one way. Is it about fire in particular? Like ashen is just like the idea of flame and purging or whatever. That's another way. And each one of those we can assign to different deities. So anyhow, I think that at the end there's 16 domains and they cover a wide variety, and we have guidance for how to use those 16 domains for all 9 of the gods in Shadowdark plus 7 new demigods. And then of course you can take these same domains and make cults, apply them to whatever pantheon is in your own setting.
Yeah, kind of like an extended tag, so to speak, with like Worlds Without Number, but instead of being a short descriptor, it's well, even the thing with Worlds Without Numbers, those tags expand out. Each has a page, and that it means something. So it's not just a verbal or an adjective or whatever. It's more than just something you're putting onto. It's actually fleshed out with ideas and direction and cultists and a magic item for each
Hmm.
one, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's just like, how can we get the flavor? Like, if you decide you want to drop the Ashen Cult into your adventure or into your setting, like, and you want them to be a protagonist or an antagonist for a while, how can we give you enough tools to where you don't have to go do a bunch of work to do that? And
Yeah,
so,
if you're doing Cthulhian mythos, you can kind of play around with that and come up with some things that work pretty well.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And there's some that just begged for it, right? Like, if you there's a the Moon Cult is in there, the Moon domain, and so it's like, well, we have lycanthropes in the game already. We could definitely build out that a little bit more, and we can, like, hone in there. It's almost like necessary. There's a revelry cult. And like, yeah, we could. There's some creatures that we could definitely use for like a revelry cult that make a lot of sense that the game doesn't have. So some of them were very like straightforward, like this is necessary almost to having this cult.
Well,
Um,
and you also have creatures that are also associated, not just people, but monsters and such that could be used in conjunction that are fitting.
Yeah, yeah. Satyrs, I think, are the one for the revelry cult. Maybe satyrs are for the chaos cult, and fawns are for the revelry cult. They're different. But yeah, yeah. Creatures are. There's a hound archon for the or hound celestial for the archon domain. Because I like the hounds of heaven sort of a feel. So there's like a humanoid, dog-headed humanoid there,
The Hounds of
paladin.
Heaven, what's that in reference to?
I don't know where it originated from, but they were something that were stood out to me in some of the Pathfinder stuff I was playing like 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I always liked them as a creature, and they've made their way into several books that I've put together in one form or fashion. Just low level, low CR celestials that are like, you know, guard dogs, humanoid guard dogs with plate mail, big broadswords, and just, kind of these
Oh, they're anthropomorphic.
they're anthropomorphic, yeah, like a minotaur but dog head instead of a bull head.
Yeah, there's the hero system. They had a species that was like that in the Fantasy Hero. One of the supplements had a bestiary where, yeah, I always thought those were cool.
Yeah, several things that I really love creature-wise that I've just enjoyed over the years have made their way in. So like the hounds made their way in, and then in Tower of Six, my absolute favorite creature that I've ever built, and I built it years ago for a different game, but the Slaverines made it in, which are these tongues, like gross tongue creatures, right, that crawl around and spoilers, but if they attack you, they try to claw their way into your mouth. And if they manage to do that, they replace your tongue
Oh,
with
just like that
themselves.
parasitic bug in the
Yeah.
fish.
But then if they replace your tongue, then you only speak heresies and you can only speak demonic. And like they basically take over a portion of your ability to communicate. So it's really nasty for like spellcasters and things like that, or paladin. There's not paladins in this game, but like, that sort of a thing. Holy, divine casters, especially. They're not a good situation.
Well, and there's also an aspect of body horror.
Yeah, which is, I gotta find a way. So yeah. So you have the domains, you have the three adventures, you have all the stuff that comes with the domains, and then, like you said, we've got really it's four classes, but there's three classes in the book, which is the cultist, which has a full spell list, full caster, the inquisitor, which is a whole a non-caster, but still a member of the church, and then you have the knight of the covenant, which is kind of a counterpoint to the Knight of St. Idris um, from the Cursed Scrolls. That's kind of a holy knight. Um, and then the bonus class is Knight of St. Taragnus, which is the human deity. of righteousness and justice in ShadowDark. And so I thought it would be fun to like have like a die-hard human class that is really focused around things that a human date. I was thinking about like what makes humans interesting in a fantasy place, and one of the big ones is like uh, they're such a short-lived race that like I think D&D touched on this in the Forgotten Realms or something like that, but like most of the like writings, like the histories of the world or like the magical writings that are done or the research that's scripted is put down by humans because elves and other long-lived races can just remember. And so they
Right.
can just or they pass it on in other ways, but humans do a lot of the writing. And so Knights of St. Agnes kind of carry that forward with being very good with scrolls and things of that nature, which I think is fun.
And a bonus free if you pick it up if you back in the first 48 hours.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you can buy it at any point, but if you back us in the first couple days, we'll give you a Knight of Saint Tragnas for free. Which I don't know. It's fun. I like making classes for this game. They're really light and fresh, but they've got some really cool ideas in them. And in playtest, especially the Cultist has been really well received. People really like the it has a class ability that's basically, when you deal damage to someone, you can choose to burn a number of hit points from yourself to add D4s to your attack damage. And that's very fun because as a full-fledged caster, D4 hit dice or D4 hit point caster, you don't have a lot of hit points to play around with. It maybe is a D6, I can't remember, but you don't have a lot of hit points to play around with. But burning them to really juice your spells is really fun. And I think that'll be a really interesting class, especially at you know lower levels to push your luck with a little bit.
Yeah, that is kind of fun. It kind of makes me think of, I guess, a little bit with DCC with the spell burn.
Yeah,
Except here you're able to just deal some more damage.
yep, exactly right. And I think as someone who's ran a lot of Shadow Dark at this point, like it's very typical for a caster to like stand in the back, just like in any other game, and hurl spells and whatever. And a lot of times, as a GM, sometimes you run the type of combat that allows you to get bypass the front line and get into them, but not always, and not always consistently. And so thinking about how can you make those back of the line spellcasters still have to play around with hit points, I think is interesting because often they don't have to think about their hit points for, an encounter or two. And I think that that's just a resource that we can tap into.
Well, they can also be suicide bombers, right? You get a group
Hmm.
of them, all of a sudden they take somebody big down.
Yeah, exactly right. Like they can weigh that cost of, hey, I've only got 6 hit points, but I can burn. This is the big boss of the dungeon. We're in the last room. We've got to do something. We're in a desperate strait. I'm gonna burn 5 of my hit points to get 5 extra D4 or whatever it is to really be able to juice this damage here. And I know that I'm down to 1 hit point at that point, but the difference between having 6 hit points and 1 hit point often doesn't really matter.
I mean, like it could be like there are evil NPCs
Oh
and
yeah, that just
they just
pull
they're
that
willing to give up
cord.
their lives. They
Yeah,
are already
yeah.
dead.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. 100%. 100%. Yeah, yeah.
So maybe even a person of higher level would be fearful of a group of small cultists. Like they could just burn really. It's like-
100%. Yeah, like that's super fun to have creatures of that nature that aren't really worried about self-annihilation that much. So,
Very cool. Well, I think we're getting probably pretty close. Was there anything else we need to discuss?
oh gosh, I'm trying to think if there was anything else that was meaningful about it. I think the only other thing is like, when we say that there's classes, I think the fun again, the thing that I really enjoy about Shadow Dark is that it's not just a class. We already talked about cultists have a whole bunch of new spells. There's 25 new spells in the book. Their spell list incorporates spells that are also from the core rulebook and from one of the cursed scrolls. But there's also there's a new backgrounds table. There's new titles for all of the classes. There's a handful of new items, mundane items that just I felt like might be cool for you to have in a more cult-centered. campaign or adventure. So there's just a bunch of like little tidbits and add-ons. There's a big roll table for things that you might find on an altar in the cultist sanctuary, right? So I think there's a lot of bits and pieces here. If cults are something that you want to have in your game, I think this will be a good fit for you.
This will be a good fit.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good though. We should maybe wrap it up, and I mean we're going to be talking before too long about some other projects I'm sure in the near future. So
Yeah, so we'll be, I believe, the 20th. Is that when we
20th, 6 days from today. So
6 days
yeah.
from today? So yeah, we'll be pulling that lever. We're, I think, just five people short of hitting 400
I
followers.
think we were three last time I
Three.
checked. We're right there on the cusp. So yeah.
Yeah, so who knows? Maybe this will put us over the edge to being maybe one of the more successful or the most successful of the Kickstarters that I've done. So
That'd be very exciting. Yeah, that'd be
pretty,
fun.
pretty
Yeah.
excited.
Good way to kick off the year. So,
Well, I've been thinking too. It's like, well, I can do flyers pretty cheap at Mixam, even like
hmm
or postcards. Or if you get something blank, it's like we could just print some stuff up on that size form. I wonder what we could put on there or things to add. But it's probably it's a little late to be monkeying around with this kind of stuff. So especially,
Yeah. That
don't
you
do
get
this
to
to me,
think of
Jeff.
it. That's right. No, no, yeah. That's my job, not yours. Um, well, hey, it's been great to chat with you,
Yeah.
Jeff. It's really good, actually. Let's do it again sooner rather than later.
Okay. Talk to you later, Zach.
All right. See ya.